What we want to do next is call a web API that I have set up. It's under /API/movies. This will return movie information in JSON format. And I can also update and create movies. In ASP.NET 5, I've done this by setting up a controller that talks to a SQL Server database using the entity framework, but you don't need to set up all that infrastructure to follow along with this module. What you could do in your public folder is just create a JSON file. Here I've created a file called movies.json because in the browser and from JavaScript, they really don't know if they are invoking a web API or retrieving a static file. To them, it's just an HTTP message where the response is JSON data. And you can see I get the same information whether I go to the API or to the static file. Now, to communicate with the server, I'm going to need to install an additional module, a module that's part of the Aurelia suite. So inside the root of the web project where package.json lives, I'm going to JSPM install Aurelia HttpClient. JSPM will go out and download that module, put it on my file system, and we're ready to go. Let's start off by trying something very simple with this new module that I've just installed. Let's go into the app.js view model, and what I want to do is use this HTTP client. Since it is a module, I can just import HTTP client from Aurelia HTTP client, and that will bring the class HTTP client into scope for me. I could, from the constructor of app, say this.http equals a new instance of the HTTP client. So what I will do is instantiate HTTP client directly from my app view model. A little bit later in this module, we will look at injecting the HTTP client, which will decouple my view model from the specific client that's being used, which can make my software a little more flexible and testable. But first, we'll start off with this simple case. During Activate, let's do this. Let's use that HTTP client that I saved off in an HTTP field to get from movies.json. That will get the information that is in the static file. I'm going to return the result of http.get because, like many asynchronous activities in JavaScript these days, that call will result in a promise object. A promise object is something that promises to deliver a value to you in the future. I can get that value by adding a then method here, and I'm going to write an arrow function. For more on promises and arrow functions, see the ES6 course on Pluralsight. Also, I promise to explain why I'm returning this promise object from Activate in the next module. The first parameter that you pass to the then method is a success handler, a function that will be invoked if the promise resolves successfully. So I'm going to say when we get the response, then this.movies equals response.content. Hopefully what that will do is bring those 3 movies back from movies.json. They'll automatically be deserialized for me. I'm going to take that array of movies, save it into a field in my view model called movies, and that should allow me to go into app.html. And instead of saying hello world, let's write out a div that says you have movies.length movies. Save the application and refresh. And I can see that I do indeed have 3 movies. Let's see if we can display some information about those movies. So I will create a table. In the table, I want to have the title of the movie and the year it was released. And then I need a table row for each movie that I have. Now, in addition to Aurelia defining some custom elements that I can use like compose, Aurelia also has some custom attributes defined. One of those attributes is repeat. So I'm going to say repeat.for. This is like writing a for loop in JavaScript. What I'm going to do is ask Aurelia to loop through a collection from the view model called movies. And for each item that it finds, put it in what you can think of as a local variable here called movie, and then stamp out this DOM element and all of its children once for each movie that it finds. So now I can write a table cell that will display the title of the movie, and I can write out a cell that displays the release year of that movie. Let's save this once more and try it out. And now I don't have the prettiest UI, but I am retrieving information from the web server. I am displaying that information into the browser, and I'm doing that with a simple view and view model, where the view model is now using HTTP client to make calls to the web server. We're going to come back and talk in a little more detail later in the course about using things like repeat.for For right now, I really want to focus on this view model for a moment, and the next thing we want to look at is how can we inject an HTTP client into this view model. That will give us some additional flexibility and testability.